Hi, so welcome to this video series. My name is Natalie Fields, and this is for one of my teaching reading classes in my master's program. And one of the assignments is that we have to do a book study, and since I'm actually not working in a classroom among a teacher community, our instructor wanted us to create a series of online videos that we could use in a book study. So this is going to be video 1, and with that I'm going to introduce the book that I've been reading and would like to do a book study with teachers on. I think it would be very helpful for teachers of all content areas. My content area field is secondary English language arts, so that is where I am, but this is also a study for any grade level, any content area, focused on all teachers integrating more reading strategies within their classroom. And the book that I'm using, and I actually have it on my Kindle, so it's going to be glowing, but it is by Donald Miller, The Book Whisperer, Awakening the Inner Reader in Every Child. And this is what the cover looks like. I downloaded it on Amazon for $13 to my Kindle, and they also had a paper copy of it. But it seemed to be the one with the best reviews. I actually recognized the names of people who had given it a critique, and some of them were even people who have been authors of the textbooks we've been using. So I thought that it was a pretty credible book to read, and seemed like a lot of people had had a good experience with it. So I think what I would do to start out the book study is just go into the book, and everyone who would be involved in the book study would need to kind of do a pre-reading before each meeting that we had. And I think that the best way that we could probably reflect together as a group would be to have a double entries set up in a notebook or something, just something very simple. I don't know if you can see that, but I have the double entry format, and the one column is the quote from the book and the page number, and then the connection or thought that you have with that. So that's kind of, I think, the best way that people could keep up together and share their thoughts and ideas after the introduction of each chapter. And that way we could all be a part of it and share what we're learning and what connections we're making, thoughts we're wanting to integrate into our personal classrooms, and that kind of thing. So the very first thing that I really liked about this in the author's introduction is that she addresses that her credibility is not as a researcher or someone who has a PhD and a doctorate and, someone who has all of these titles attached to her name. Donald Miller's credibility comes from the fact that she actually has experience in the classroom and has gone through the trial and error process. And for me, as someone who is not a teacher yet and coming into it as a new field, is really important to make a connection to someone with, because a lot of times when we get caught up in our textbooks and things like that, it's always about research and the best strategies based on doctorates and things like that, and it can be really overwhelming to know how you can incorporate all of the things that you learn, all of the research methods into one class. So automatically I made a connection with the author because she just says that she's not someone who, may be as book smart as she needs to be, but she herself is an avid reader. She loves to read, and she goes throughout the book explaining that she can't separate reading from herself because it is so much of her that she is not a person without it. So she has this passion for reading, which I think is a wonderful way to connect to her, and she wants to share that with others. So I really like the fact that, to me, her credibility comes from being a teacher and being someone who has had a lot of experience rather than just knowing they went and researched everything that she possibly could. Another one of the quotes that really stood out to me and let me find it in here, is that she says, a quote by Toni Morrison has said, "If there's a book you really want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it." And she got that idea from Toni Morrison out of a book she read, and she wanted to find a book to find a book that showed how to connect reading and a love for reading into the classroom, and she could never find that. So that is her whole purpose in writing this book, is how we as teachers can integrate a love for reading into our students, into every student. And there's certain things that have to be done. So I really liked that. She definitely instilled some inspiration in me reading it for the first time, and I really liked that quote. So I think I'm just going to go through and share chapter 1 thoughts that I thought were really important. And what I have been doing is, just as I see something that really stands out to me, I have been I'll show you, highlighting it in my Kindle, and then transferring it over to paper so that I could kind of write out more of what I thought. But the first chapter is called There and Back Again. And she explains how one of her very first lessons that she taught, she has spent all of this time developing a lesson about a novel that she wanted to introduce her class to, and it completely failed. And she had spent all of this time integrating activities and all of the ideas out of the book to make it come alive and to be real. But she saw that her students were just getting through the assignment to get through the assignment. And I know as teachers, you guys can totally relate to that. I know even throughout my observations, or even in my current position, I am a program coordinator for a scholarship program, and I teach training and development courses for our 80 students in our program. And I know that even with them, if I'm so excited and have something I'm totally passionate about sharing and give it to them, so many times you can tell that they're just aggravated and wanting to do everything they can to get it done as quickly as they can. And that is what she noticed, that even though she had spent all of this time developing something that she personally thought was going to be wonderful and marvelous, that it failed. And the reason it failed was because she was focused so much on what she wanted the class to get and what she wanted the classroom to be like, that she didn't take the time to actually let the students choose what their learning would look like and what their learning environment would look like. And that is definitely something that, as an English language arts teacher, I'm super passionate about. And ever since my undergraduate class teaching writing and adolescent reading, adolescent literature, we discussed that. And we actually discussed this book, which the author mentions as one of her starting places as well. But it's called In the Middle by Nancy Atwell. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. I'm familiar with it because it's definitely common in English language arts, but that totally changed my perspective of what teaching was like and what teaching could be. It's the workshop method of letting students make choices for themselves and engaging them in reading in a way that they choose and we guide them. So we're their guide and they kind of choose what to be. And that is pretty much the summary of that. I will share a few things that I highlighted just so that you can hear some direct quotes from the book. She said, "I learned that being the best reader and writer in the room is not about power and control. Instead, I must be a source of knowledge that my students access while learning how to read and write. Instead of standing on stage each day dispensing knowledge to my young charges, I should guide them as they approach their own understandings." Definitely relate to that, and definitely want to be someone who guides my students instead of aggravates them to read what I want to read. She goes on to talk about control, and she just expresses her passion for reading. She goes on to say that reading is both cognitive and an emotional journey, that we must, as teachers, equip the travelers and teach them how to read a map, show them what to do when they get lost, but ultimately the journey is theirs alone. And she also talks about how we have to be models for our students. So even if you're not a English language arts teacher, but you're in a different content area, reading is important in every content area in a different way, because reading in math is completely different than reading a poem or reading a novel. You know, reading in science, you have to learn how to read experiments and in a different way than you have to read in social studies. You have to learn how to read in all of these different ways. In art, you learn how to read into what artists depict in visual. And visual texts are just as important as, you know, words on a page. So in every content area, there's definitely different ways of reading. And she definitely states that we have to be role models for our students. Our students have to see that we have a passion for what we're teaching, and we have to actually show them ourselves. So that's personally what I got out of chapter 1. If you've read the book, you may have gotten something totally different. And definitely, if you've read this book, please comment below what you got out of the first chapter. If you haven't read this book, then just let me know what you think about the thoughts that I shared, and that will help me so much. So that is the first session and introduction in chapter 1 to the Book Whisperer. Thank you.